I mentioned the conversion of Queen Helen, and that's not in the war, so you don't have it, but it is in the Antiquities, the last book. And interestingly, the last book basically ends with the death of James, and it then goes on to enumerate all the high priests up to the war against Rome. This is quite a long story here, but it takes place around the time of somewhere in the 30s or 20s, 30s or 40s. At the same time, Helen of Adiabene, which is, by the way, northern Iraq today, Kurdistan, and her son Izat became converts to Judaism under the following circumstances. Monobasis, they're all called Monobasis, surnamed Bazius, king of Adiabene, seized with a passion for his sister Helena. So this is either his half-sister or sister. It seems, remember in the Bible stories, Abraham says Sarah's his sister. Apparently there was some tradition. Abraham comes from this area in the Bible, northern Iraq, northern Syria. Some tradition of sister marriage there. And one occasion he was sleeping beside her, etc., 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 etc. And he heard a voice bidding him remove his hand from her womb so as not to cramp the babe, blah, blah. Some miraculous birth of her son Izates, I-Z-A-T-E-S, I think a variant of Isaac. He also had another son by the same wife, Helena, called Monobasis, like himself, and other children for otherwise. So there was that huge harems. Now this was a favorite wife, an intimate wife, a related wife, and her two children. So in any case, he grows up, he goes down to southern Iraq to do trade, and there he finally gets a kingdom from his father. Looks like modern Haran. This is the land, by the way, that was saved by the flood in the days of Noah, he said. And they also have some indication the ark came to rest there, but it's not Turkey or Mount Arad as we see it. It's northern Iraq someplace. Apparently there was some monument there to commemorate this. In any event, I can't read the whole thing. It really is too long, but it shows how important Josephus thought it was. While Izati was residing in Sharak-Spasini, which is today's Basra in southern Iraq, a certain Jewish merchant named Ananias visited the king's wives, taught them to worship God after the manner of the Jewish tradition, and it was through their agency that he brought the notice to the notice of Izat, whom he similarly won over with cooperation of the women. When Izat was summoned by his father back up to Adiabene, Ananias accompanied him in obedience to his urgent request. Who greets Paul according to the book of Acts in Damascus? Ananias. It has also happened, moreover, that Helena had likewise been instructed by another Jew who had been brought over to their laws. When Izates came to Adiabene to take over the kingdom and saw his brothers and his other kingdom in chains, he was distressed. They used to kill all the other brothers in this kingdom. And so that only one would rule. Regarding it as impious either to kill or to keep them in chains, yet thinking it hazardous to keep them with him if they were not in prison, cherishing the resentment as they must, he sent some of them with their children to Claudius Caesar in Rome as hostages. So Claudius is in the 40s, so it begins to date this. Anyway, when he learned his mother was very much pleased with the Jewish religion, he was zealous to convert to himself, and since he considered that he would not be genuinely a Jew unless he was circumcised, he was ready to act accordingly. When his mother learned of their intention, however, she tried to stop him. They have arguments over it, and she says this would produce disaffection among his citizens. Besides this advice, she tried by every means to hold him back. He in turn reported her arguments to Ananias. So Ananias and a second person get in among the women, and their doctrine is, the king, he said, can worship God even without circumcision, if indeed he had been fully decided to be a devoted adherent of Judaism. That counted more than circumcision. So here we're basically having the argument of Paul is outlining in Galatians against the people who want to circumcise and the people who don't want to circumcise. And Paul is on the non-circumcised side. Ananias here is on the non-circumcised side. And to my view, the unnamed person with Ananias is Paul. But he's not named. Then another zealous Jew from Galilee, a Galilean, comes. He's called Eleazar. And he has a reputation for strict adherence to the ancestral laws. And he finds them reading the law of Moses. Well, it's quite clear that the Talmud has the same story, and it makes it clear that the passage that he is reading is Genesis 17:11, where Abraham is commanded, you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and then it goes on to say you shall circumcise all the people in your household too. So that's clearly what they are reading. And then he says to them, look, king, in your ignorance you are guilty of the greatest offense against the law, and therefore against God. For you ought not merely to read the law, but also even more to do what it is commanded doing. How long will you continue to be uncircumcised? If you have not yet read the law concerning this matter, read it now, so that you may know what an impiety it is to commit. Upon hearing these words, the king postponed the deed no longer. Withdrawing immediately to the next room, he summoned his physician and had the prescribed rite before. Then he sent for both his mother and his teacher Ananias and notified them that he had performed this rite. They were immediately seized with consternation, blah, 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 blah. So it goes on then. Anyway, Helena goes on more about her. Let's see. She wants to make a trip to Jerusalem. And she sees that the people there are very poor. And on her arrival was very advantageous for the people of Jerusalem. She has money. For at that time the city was hard pressed with famine. Now this famine is mentioned in the book of Acts, and as a result of the famine in the book of Acts, if you've read the book of Acts, Paul and Barnabas are elected by the community in Antioch to go up and bring famine relief. Oh, here's the parallel here. And many were perishing from want of money to purchase what was needed. Queen Helen sent some of her attendants to Alexandria to buy grain with large sums of money, and others to Cyprus to bring back a cargo of dried figs. So she sends representatives, her treasury representatives, because she's quite rich, to Cyprus and to Alexandria in Egypt. This is the mid-40s. Her attendants speedily returned with these provisions, which she thereupon distributed among the poor. She's left a very great name for herself with this benefaction. When her son, all this is borne out by way